Hello, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Pints. I'm your host, Rob, and with me today is Jacob Weldon, a friend of mine and also an incredibly talented filmmaker and editor who is also one of the co-creator people of ReBoot Rewind, a documentary series about a very popular computer animated show made in Vancouver, Canada in the 90s, which I was a big fan of growing up, and many of you probably were a big fan of when you were growing up. And you were as well.
Oh, yeah. The show came out the same year I was born, so I'm literally a lifelong fan.
You're so young.
Yeah.
So, tell me how it happened.
Yeah. Well, viewers of the program will have heard that Raquel reached out to me about the idea of sort of shooting an interview or something small scale to cover Reboot. Probably talk to Gavin or something. Gavin Blair, one of the co-creators of Reboot, is a friend of ours. And we'd met him many years before. But from there, it kind of snowballed into a bigger thing. Gavin got us in touch with a lot of people that worked on the show, and so, and then the Story Hive grant came up. So it turned from like, oh, maybe we'll interview one person to, oh, we're interviewing 50 people, and now this is an 8-episode series.
Even the budget for hard drives for that sounds
Yeah, I will say, the grant money from Story Hive, a lot of it went towards hard drives. Yeah, I think maybe like 40 terabytes worth of footage. And yeah, like I said, there's 50 people we interviewed, and most of them were an hour. So you can kind of, or well, some of them went as long as 6 hours. So you can do the math on that, how many hours of footage. So even in like 6.5 hours of program that we put out over 8 episodes, that's still just like the tip of the iceberg in terms of like how much stuff we captured. And there's like so many like weird little miscellaneous stories that were told that like I want to release onto YouTube as just like little bits and pieces for people to watch eventually because they're hilarious, but didn't necessarily make it into the program if they were like on a tangent or whatever.
I know Sean, who I had on for an earlier episode, was told me a really great story, and I hope this doesn't spoil things, but there was a reboot episode where it was like Mad Max
Yes.
riff where Megabyte, the bad guy in the show, goes into the game with him and turns into the big rig. But then I remember watching the new-ish Mad Max movie that came out like 5-10 years ago, and it's strangely familiar.
Yeah. So the story goes there is Brendan McCarthy was he started out in comic books doing like Judge Dredd and stuff, 2000 AD or whatever it's called, in the UK in the 90s. And he got brought on to do a lot of the initial design work for the show. So he came up with the designs for a lot of characters. Like Bob has his signature silver dreads because of Brendan, and a lot of different aspects were kind of his idea. Like the idea of the web being this sort of like scary outer space, weird H.R. Geiger kind of world was his idea. Brendan happens to be a massive Mad Max fan. And so as the show kind of progressed, it went into its second season. He's seeing the opportunity to like spoof stuff because they were always spoofing movies and TV shows and video games in the show, especially when a GameCube would come down because everything changes. Everyone puts on a costume. Um, so he's like, well, why don't we do Mad Max? And so the story goes is that he draws the concept of Megabyte as a truck and just kind of shuffles it into another pile of drawings for an unrelated episode. And the guys all see it and they're like, what the hell is this? He's like, it's Megabyte as a truck. Isn't that cool? And they're like, okay, well, we can't not do this. Like, it's insane.
It's
awesome.
really cool. But look, you gotta check the episode out because it was like a great look.
Yeah. So from there, Brendan just went wild with it and drew a whole bunch of stuff. And so the whole episode, like most of that episode takes place in the game. And yeah, it's very Mad Max. But anyways, what happens is that episode finishes, they continue. Brendan takes a copy of the Mad Max episode on VHS tape and sends it to George Miller and their people in Australia. And the way he put it is he had on a post-it note on that tape, he said, "Whatever happened to Mad Max?" Because at this time, there hadn't been a movie in, like, 10 years or something. So, one thing leads to another. He ends up getting to go down to Australia to talk to George Miller, and they start working on the designs and concepts and everything for Fury Road. And if you watch the movie, Brendan McCarthy is in the credits. He was one of the co-writers of the movie. So,
So another thing Reboot did for us.
yeah, so yeah, Bad Bob is kind of responsible for Mad Max Fury Road, which I love because that's one of my favorite episodes of the show. And then yeah, once that movie came out and I put that connection together, it just blew my mind.
That's really incredible, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did it look like for you when when things kicked off? Raquel was like, "Hey, let's make something." Actually, what I'm more interested is what do you think it would have looked like if you never gotten the story hub?
Yeah, I mean, getting that grant from Story Hive enabled us to do a lot of things. For example, we traveled to a few places in order to get interviews. We went to Kelowna, we went to Salt Spring Island, we went to Toronto, um, and all of those things. Obviously, travel is expensive, and we probably wouldn't have done that unless we had the budget to do it. So that uh, granted us a lot of uh, possibilities there. And I'd say one of my favorite interviews from the thing is the interview we had with Dale Taylor, who was at the time Reboot was being made. He was one of the heads of programming of YTV.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it was a pretty cool situation where we got connected to him, and he lives in Toronto, and we were already planning on going to Toronto to interview Spanky, one of the animators, and
Great name.
Corey, another one of the animators who now works at Ubisoft. And we filmed those interviews in the Ubisoft mocap studio. So if you watch the documentary, you'll notice that those two guys are sitting like a pretty interesting looking area, and it's a mocap studio. It's at Ubisoft, so that was cool. And Sharon, the voice of Andrea, was also in Toronto. But yeah, anyways, Dale Taylor um, was a super cool dude, um, and you could tell he really cared about like quality programming for kids. Like you could tell it was important to him. And Reboot, he just like the crown jewel of their like 90s programming. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, wow. That's actually really neat to hear about YTV because I grew up watching a staggering amount of YTV. It was
Oh
like
yeah.
my favorite channel, and I remember what were they, the PJs or like PJ like the what were they called?
Yeah, it was like program jockeys, right?
Right.
The hosts of the zone and stuff like that. Yeah.
And there was the like bubblegum monster,
Snit.
Snit, and
Yeah.
was it PJ Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like all kind, but like then yeah, like the days of like actual kids programming that was good and not just absurdist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, you shot a ton of stuff.
Hmm.
You warned me not to ask you what camera you shot on. That's fair. Your DOP would answer that question.
Well, it's Brandon's camera. It was his own rig, and it's a Nikon. I want to say Z8. Does that
Did you shoot with
sound
two
right?
cameras or only one?
We did shoot with 2 cameras. The A angle was Brandon's camera, and he was operating it, and then most of the rest of the time, we were using a Panasonic GH5, I think, that we, borrowed from Bryce, or Bryce was there and he was operating it. But we did have 2 we rotated between 3 different B cameras. So there was that, there was Seb's camera that I definitely don't remember what it was. And we also had Logan on for a few days, and his camera is a Black Magic
Hmm.
one. So the B cameras were all different, which made color grading a bitch, I'm sure. But thanks,
Did you do
Brandon.
any of it? Yeah. What part in the post production did you do?
I did all the editing, all the picture editing, but Brandon did the color. And we did that all in DaVinci Resolve, which is sort of my preferred edit suite of choice these days. Um,
Were you a Premiere kid?
I was actually a Final Cut Pro 7 kid. That's like what I learned on in high school. But then when Final Cut Pro 7 went to X and everyone got pissed off at how different it was, I was like, yeah, and I switched to Premiere because it was more like Final Cut Pro 7. But then so I used Premiere for a while. Um, and then I started using Avid for work. But yeah, then I just kind of came across Resolve and there was just a lot of things I liked about it. The sending stuff to the colorist being super duper easy because it's all staying in Resolve was like the biggest reason. But yeah, it's cool software.
I'm actually moving over. I've been doing Premiere for 15 years, which is
Yeah.
what I hate because it's like I can edit while watching TV on Premiere.
Hmm.
Unless it's really interesting and good, then I can't. But
Yeah.
but I mean, I own a couple Blackmagic cameras, so I own pro versions of Resolve, and even like stuff like, you must know this in Adobe, where you're like, oh, I got to do a title. Okay, I have to go open up After Effects, and like you have to leave the program, or like, oh, I got to edit audio. Oh, I got to do Audition. I got to open, and it's like all they've subdivided one program into other things to
Hmm.
rationalize the bigger subscription. Whereas already I can do stuff in Resolve. I know my way around, but it's already just nicer that it's a tab
Yeah.
because you're not opening up other programs. You're not worried that other program you've opened up is now consuming too many resources.
Hmm. And Adobe's whole subscription model thing is like pisses me off too. Like once in a while I'll get like a job where it's like, oh, we already started this in Premiere. I'm like, oh God, okay, I guess I'll buy a month of Premiere and get this done and then cancel it again. But yeah, I hate having to go back to it now that I'm used to Resolve. Um, yeah.
So roughly, this was 8 half-hour episodes.
Uh the shortest episode is like 35 minutes. The
Oh,
longest one's like almost an hour. So they kind of vary in length depending on
okay,
how
so it's
much
much.
topic we cover.
So how long roughly did it take you to edit this?
Well, I I started editing it like really like putting time into it in like late December of 2023, and then it was all done and submitted by about June. So it was about 6 months like solid.
Were you working other gigs at the time though?
Yeah, I was working my full-time MOW editing job at the same time.
Oh God, that's a lot of editing.
Yeah. It sure is.
Oh wow, man, that's heavy.
Yeah, that was a crazy 6 months, and, like, I don't know if I've still haven't, like, fully mentally recovered from it. I'm still, when I'm going the computer, I'm like, "I need to take a break from the computer." I still feel like I'm just, like, in overdrive mode. But, yeah, I mean, it was awesome. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love doing it, so
So my question is, do you have any tips? Like, because I'll give you the preface.
yeah.
My friends and I are trying to plan this project that's sort of like a mockumentary with like like components. It's a mockumentary about the making of a fantasy series that was never finished,
Mhm.
and so a third of it will be interviews.
Yeah.
And our friend, we have managed to dig up a tiny budget for mostly a sound guy and
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
but I am likely going to get editing dropped in my lap, and overall, it will probably be 6 30-minute episodes.
Yeah.
Are there any tips that you could perhaps share, Sensei?
For yeah, definitely. And this was my first time doing a documentary, so going, like, feet to the fire, like putting together 6.5 hours of program without having any real documentary experience was kind of wild, but
I'll say so.
but yeah, my tips would be um I know obviously Resolve does this, but I believe Premiere and Avid also have a function where it does um like an auto transcription feature for your footage. So you can feed it 3 hours of an interview that you shot and it'll listen to it and turn it all into text.
So you can search the text.
So you can read the text, you can search the text, so you can say, I'm looking for when he was talking about this and type that in, and it'll show you all the instances of that. And then you can just highlight that and drag it right into your timeline. That documentary would not have been possible if I couldn't do that. That was a huge lifesaver.
That is really interesting. I didn't know Resolve did that because I've been using
Yeah.
that to just remove like verbal tics and stuff with
Hmm.
this
Yeah.
in Premiere, and I didn't know Resolve has that, which is really heartening.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you'll be sitting there and you're like, I remember when he was talking about this, and you like go and search for it and you find it in like 2 seconds instead of like, oh, just scrubbing through a 3 hour interview or whatever the fuck. Like, it made a big difference. Um, the other tip I would say is just like, and maybe this is more like a general thing for editing, but like, if it's something that you like and makes you smile and you think is funny, it's probably going to make other people smile and be funny. So, whatever's working for you, will work for other people.
That's really profound. I feel like that could go for a lot of things, like
Was
you said.
it?
Yeah, personal development, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, my other question is going to be more technical.
Yes.
Sound, strangely enough, with the guy with all
Mm.
the mics, is not my forte. Did you do the sound mastering on it?
Okay, so sound. I have a friend named James Neves, who I think maybe the running gun we did together, he may have worked on it. I can't remember
That was
now.
a long time
It was
ago.
a long time ago. But anyways, James is kind of my go-to sound guy for all the stuff that I do. Um, he was not present on set except for the day we were at the sound guys studios. We went to Dick and Rogers sound studio, and I was like, James, I know you're a sound guy, so you might like to come for this interview. And he was like, yeah, I'll be there. So for the most of it, I borrowed his microphone, which was a nice like Sennheiser shotgun mic. I don't know the model of it or whatever, but it was like $1,000 mic kind of
So to
thing.
clarify, you didn't use lav mics; you just used a shotgun mic.
No lav mics, which in some cases I maybe regret, because we did get a few locations where there was like air conditioners and crap running in the background, and that was a bit of a problem. But James handled all the post sound, and he did an excellent job of cleaning up a lot of the interviews, like the roundtable interview that's quite prominent with Ian, Gavin, and Dan. There was like an air conditioner running in the background the whole time of that thing. And Ian, with like his very like northern English accent and stuff, is like it's already a little bit hard to understand.
Oh
But
no,
then you're like dealing with like balancing that. It's like it was really important that we got it right, and we did. So I was pretty happy about that.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah,
Now,
but yeah, no lav mics, just the one shotgun mic. I guess on the day we did the roundtable interview, there we had two microphones. We rented an extra mic, so we had like one kind of pointing in each direction over the table. Um, but yeah, if it was a single interview, we just one shotgun mic.
excellent. So the question I have is, how did you deliver the files to him? Was it an OMF? And I know nobody watching this cares about this part.
Um, what did I send him? It's actually weird because so for actually I bought this for Seed, the short film that I did before this,
Which we'll talk about.
which we'll talk about. But I bought this Zoom recorder that we used with James's mic, and it's like a 32-bit float
Oh,
audio.
I want one of those.
It rocks. It just handles everything. So that was like a big like win for the documentary too, because that was like I just set it up and let it run, and you don't have to worry about like levels and stuff. It's like if someone's whispering, it's like there you can just pump it up. If someone screams, like it doesn't peak. Um, so that was huge. But the issue is that I couldn't send James an AAF out of Resolve at 32-bit.
Right. So you had to send him the raw files
So
or
I
something.
had to like link it to Premiere first and then
Oh,
output the AAF from Premiere to send to him in order for it to all work right. It was a process trying to figure that out with him, but um again, it was worth it. So
yeah. No, that I've already heard recently. I got in an argument with a friend because they were like, "Oh yeah, the new Zooms all have 32-bit float." I'm like, "No, they don't." Yeah, I was wrong.
yeah, it was very cool. And it wasn't that expensive of a recorder. I mean, it only has two inputs on it, but that's all we needed. And it was like $300, I want to
I
say.
think the 4 track one is like only 500 with 32-bit
Yeah,
float. So I'm looking to upgrade like ASAP.
it rocks. I recommend it.
That's good to hear because yeah, no, I love anything that gets more data and keeps it safer.
Hmm.
But you mentioned Seed. Now,
Yeah,
I've worked with you and I know we're in the same circles. I know that you did this short film that did quite well and is really
yeah,
cool. Can we talk about that?
for sure. So Seed, we shot it. It's almost 2 years ago now. It was January of 2023. We shot it. I had originally conceived of this as a run and gun movie, which I think most people watching this are familiar with what run and gun is.
Yeah, I used to love it, but make a film in
Yeah,
48 hours. Now with their other one, Shits and Giggles, which
yeah,
is like low budget but all the time in the world, I prefer that one.
right. Yeah, yeah. So I had conceived of this as like a run and gun idea, which I know you're not supposed to pre-write them, but
So many people do.
I know, and I wanted to do it anyway. So, anyways, I wrote this movie. My sister helped me put together like the very initial draft of the script, and right away I was like, "This is too much movie for 5 minutes. It can't be longer than 5 minutes." And I'm like, "There's no way the pacing won't work. It'll suck." So I wrote it longer, so it turned into like a 15-minute short film, and it's a horror comedy. It's very kind of like David Cronenberg, David Lynch inspired, like a lot of Eraserhead going on, but it's like sort of a dark, sexy one night stands kind of story, but then it devolves into disgusting horror. And it's been pretty well received. Like we've been doing the film festival circuit for about a year and a bit now, and it's gone Eastern Canada. It's gone to a number of festivals in the States. It's been in a handful of places in Europe, which is really cool. Some festival on an island off of like Madagascar had a festival that reached out to us and they're like, "We want to put this in the festival." I'm like, "Yeah, cool. I didn't even know your place existed." um, Notably, it was at the Vancouver Badass Film Festival, not the last one, but the previous one, and we won best short film there. Uh, I won best director. James got best sound. Um, so we did really well there. We cleaned up, and it's a blast to watch with an audience because there's a moment in it where it's like the setup comes and it's like you realize that something truly awful and disgusting is going to happen, but you got to sit there and wait for it to happen. And just listening to people in the audience go, "Oh no, oh no, oh my god, no!" Like they know it's coming. It's the best thing to sit there and listen to people react to it.
I feel like watching at the Rio would be even better because of the alcohol involved.
Oh
'Cause
yeah, that's definitely the crowd for it.
yeah, cool. So, and then you mentioned that you were looking for a home for it now. How does that work?
Yeah, so first of all, it's pretty R-rated, so I don't know, like, if it can even exist on YouTube, maybe Vimeo, but we're kind of, like, hoping to find something like maybe I don't know if Shudder really does short films, but something Shudder adjacent. Hopefully we can find, like, a home for it.
Like the off-brand Shiver.
Yeah, something like that. And it's a pretty unique brand of horror movies, so, like, even places that are, like, straight up kinda classical horror channels might be like, "This is a little bit too weird for us." So yeah, we're trying to find the right home for it. Me and the producers, Bryce, Anna, Jesse. That's like something we're actively working on right now. So maybe hopefully by the time this comes out, it'll be out somewhere. But at the moment, I don't have anywhere that anyone can watch it publicly.
But I guess the big question is because, like, now I know, and we were talking about this before we rolled, you're an editor and you
Mhm.
directed that.
Yeah,
I believe that editors make incredible directors. Maybe because I'm an editor and I like, but like it's like
I
I do
agree. Yeah.
like because like I've been on sets on professional shows where like it's a new director and they like didn't story. It's clear they didn't storyboard things or they don't even have a shot list, and you're like,
Hmm.
oh, this is going to be an 18-hour day, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah.
But what do you want to direct next? Or what could you if like the magic wand of wishes were busted out?
I do have an idea for another probably short film floating around that's sort of another kind of weird horror comedy movie. I haven't fully written it yet, but I'm kind of like jotting down ideas and stuff and I'm trying to figure out where I want it to go. Um Something that like is about kind of like the dead internet theory, I think is like have you heard of that?
I have, and I'd love you to expand on what you think about that, and
I
maybe
mean,
hint on what this.
I'll put it in a nutshell. I won't go off on a tangent here, but basically the idea that like all the faces of like random people that you see on social media and stuff just like belong to no one, and it's just like AI or computer algorithm content that you're just seeing.
They're actually announcing, like, they are actually doing that
Well,
now.
yeah,
Like,
and
they're
now
announcing.
now it's real. Now it's like no longer a theory. Now it's like, hey, Meta AI Instagram accounts. Like, okay, cool. It's like just because you could do it doesn't mean you should do it, kind of thing.
I have had relationships end because the girl I was with was getting hit on by tons of dude on Instagram, and then they were rudely awakened after the breakup to find out those guys did not want to date them in a long-term manner. It would be really funny if all those guys were in the future AI.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the idea of like taking something like that and turning it into like a real world like invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing is like sort of an interesting idea. That's what I'm kind of like playing with right
Ooh,
now.
that's exciting and really relevant now with like all of the announcements.
Yeah, it's like instead of the internet just being populated by fake people, it's like one of those AI fake people became real people and you couldn't tell the difference anymore.
And wanted their place in things.
Yeah,
Hmm. And that's a great idea.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, you've heard of liminal spaces, right?
Mhm.
Have you seen the Backrooms shorts?
I played a video game that was like the back rooms
Yeah.
with some friends, and that was weird.
Yeah, it's weird because I've done road trips across Canada and walked. I love my one of my hobbies is stopping in really dead towns and walking around the dead malls.
Dead malls, yeah.
And those are liminal spaces.
Oh
And it
yeah.
is exactly the creepy vibe you get from that, where like everything's shuttered, but there's like a couple people, but then sometimes all the people are gone, and suddenly you're like, this place is creepy as hell.
Yeah, those are cool. I like checking those out online.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to maybe team up with Make a Steak Man. I'd love to do a backroom short in like
Hey,
the
that'd be
Unreal
cool.
Engine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we will get you on, Kyle. You will be on the show one day. Well, that's excited. I can't wait to see this other short film, and I can't wait to see Seed, and I guess I can't wait to see Reboot Rewind. I should have watched it before you guys got here. I'm sorry.
That's okay. There's lots to enjoy on there, so check it out. I mean, uh I don't have you watched the episode about the ride films yet?
No, what?
That's like a really interesting kind of like side quest to this whole thing. There's a lot of side quests going on with the reboot stuff. But there was, do you know what a ride film is?
No.
Okay,
Wait.
so
Oh, yes. No, and I've seen you posting about it. These are.
okay.
I'll let you talk.
Okay.
Sorry.
So in the 90s, IMAX was like this sort of new thing, new technology. You had like IMAX at Science World, like the Omni whatever screen. But it wasn't really like mainstream in theaters yet, or if there was an IMAX theater, it was like a weird, goofy 3D movie. Like mainstream movies weren't in IMAX. So one of the weird, goofy things that they had was like a ride film system, which if you've been to Disneyland, it's kind of like a Star Tours thing. It's like a motion simulator base with like a big curved screen in the front. So in IMAX's case, it's like a really big, like 14-foot tall screen in the front. So they developed this technology, and at the same time, Mainframe was working on Reboot, Beast Wars, yada yada yada, and they were really trying to get into like the feature film world. They were like, we can take what we're doing on Reboot and make that bigger and go feature film with it. And they got talking to IMAX, and they were like wanted to figure out like a partnership there where they could make content for IMAX because IMAX was looking for content for their screens. They were like looking to make that content. So one of the things was this ride film system. So they're like, okay, cool. We'll start this out by doing a couple reboot rides for the ride film system. And they had them installed at like Metrotown in Burnaby. There was one in Toronto. Vegas had one. Um, so they made this ride. But because they were doing it bigger, they were doing it for a big screen. They weren't doing it for TV anymore. Everything was rendered at a higher resolution. There were film projectors in these ride film systems, so they were plotting their animation to film for the first time. Um, so those ride films existed for a short time. They existed for a few years in malls and stuff.
I wish I'd seen them.
Me too. I never got to see it with the ride, which I love that kind of stuff. Like I love Star Tours and whatever, and it would have been cool to see. But yeah, eventually they went away as things do. Um, but they never really existed anywhere online. So like if you wanted to go watch that ride film, it's like a 5-minute film. There's two of them. You couldn't. There wasn't really anywhere to watch it. There's like a clip on YouTube. Someone's like handy cam footage of one, but it's awful. It's like 20 years old and looks awful. It doesn't give the same experience. So we knew going into this documentary that we wanted to talk about the ride films, but film's a visual medium. You need the footage to go with it. I can't just have people sitting around talking around the ride
Act it
film
out.
if I can't show it. So I got in contact with Simex, which is the motion simulator company that now owns the IMAX ride film business. IMAX sold it off at some point in the 2000s. And they hooked me up with the footage, and like the audio was like a missing component because so they hooked me up with files for it, but we also had like a film reel of the first ride because, like I said, it was plotted to film
Oh,
and
wow.
projected on film projectors. It wasn't digitally projected. So we had to get that scanned. I'm like, okay, I have the footage for the first ride film. This doesn't exist online anywhere, so I got to get it scanned. And looking at it, I thought it was 35 millimeter film. So I took it to a place locally that does film transfers, and he had it for a while, and then he got back to me. He's like, "This isn't 35 millimeter film. This is VistaVision film." And
What the hell is
so
that?
then I went down to that rabbit hole, and so VistaVision's really, really cool. I'll geek out about that for a second. Notably, there's a movie in theaters right now called The Brutalist, which is the first film since the 60s to shoot in VistaVision. So think like a film strip. The frames all go vertically like this on 35 millimeter film. Take that film sideways now and put the frames horizontally, so they're twice as big. So they're like eight perfs instead of 4. So the guy who had this film now, his system was set up to scan 35 millimeter film. It was not set up to scan VistaVision. He's like, I need a $20,000 upgrade to my system in order to scan this. And I'm like, fuck. That's not in the budget.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for a ride movie.
So we shipped it to California to get it scanned because there's like one place that has the equipment and technology and stuff to scan VistaVision film. And then we got it back, and now it's on YouTube.
Did you get the audio for it?
I got the audio because the film reel didn't have the audio, but we got the audio from Simex, the ride system company. So I got to put those together, color graded a little bit because needed that, and then now it exists.
Outstanding.
Yeah,
I love it. Well, I think we are coming to the end of our interview. Unless you have other things you would like to promote or talk about, this is all about you, man.
Watch Seed when it comes out. Watch Reboot Rewind. It's out now on YouTube.
There'll be links below.
Yes. Yeah, and just keep on.
Yeah, man. I can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah.
Let me know if you need a camera guy.
Will do.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.